With me in studio is Maria Ramos, of course, CEO of ABSA, and we're going to be getting her perspective on what she sees being the major outcomes here at the World Economic Forum. Thanks so much, Maria, for joining us this afternoon.
It's a great pleasure.
Well, certainly, given all that's played out post-crisis in terms of the shift we've seen in the global economy, have you seen any changes in the agenda of forums like WEF?
Well, yes, I have. I think the focus is much more now on looking at Africa as a destination for investment, and I think that's exceedingly positive. I think people have recognized that the global economy has changed and continues to change. So certainly Africa is looked at as a place where you can do business, where people are looking for business opportunities. And I was in a session, and if you look at the program, it is all about looking for opportunities. The theme this year is rethinking Africa's competitiveness. And if you think about how we've come through the global recession as the continent, we've come through this recession better than most other places in the world, most other regions in the world. And I think that's exceedingly positive. We've done that. It's important to note that we've done that not because we were somehow distant or not properly connected to the global economy, but because the economies on our continent had gone through massive change and massive adjustment and had sound fiscal policies in many places. That doesn't mean to say we haven't got challenges, but those challenges in themselves pose great opportunities for growth and development.
Well, certainly that has been a key issue, because the major question and debate that's raging at the moment is whether or not Africa has sustained itself simply because it is not as well integrated into the global economy, because it is insulated. So you're saying not necessarily because of that we're seeing this fundamental shift. With that, are you seeing a change in the kind of people that are paying attention to Africa, where it was once it was once NGOs and aid, that focus being placed on the continent, as opposed to business leaders coming in with money?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you just have to look at the flows of capital flows for foreign direct investment now exceed the flows that come in for aid into the African continent. Most of the people who are here are people who are looking for business opportunities, and there are great business opportunities. And interestingly enough, they're not just in commodities, although commodities remain an important part of the business opportunities on our continent. ICT, over the last 10 years, there's been over $60 billion of investment in ICT. There are over 400 million people on this continent now that have a cell phone. In banking and finance, there's been an enormous amount of investment and interest. We have in this meeting in Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania, there are 34 registered banks. We happen to have, we as ABSA have got the third largest bank in Tanzania. Barclays has got a bank here. There's an enormous amount of opportunity across the spectrum of business. Having said that, I should also say, though, that there are continuous business opportunities. One of the things we need to get better at on our continent is the infrastructure development that really does need to take place if we do want to really develop and connect to the world. And I'm reminded of Bob Zulik, who in a recent speech made a very fundamental point to say, this is not about north and south, east and west anymore. Those are not, those are just points on a compass. Mm-hmm. It really is about thinking about the world integrated in a different way.
The question is, how do we use this basically to our advantage? We know that infrastructure, as you mentioned, is a key component to actually getting this right and leveraging of the attention that's being paid to the continent. What more? Where does focus need to be placed right now so we take advantage of our current position?
Well, I think as businesses, I think we really need to start thinking about these markets, and we are. I mean, as I say, we've got a bank in Tanzania, NBC. We've spent in the last 2 years over 400 million rand in upgrading our IT base, both between Tanzania and Mozambique, so that we can do more of that base. The future has to be there. And we continue to look for investment opportunities. I think business continues to look for investment opportunities. We need to think about it from a country and a regional point of view. I think governments need to think about how we get regional integration going, and not just because the commitment is there, but I think we need to join hands as business and government to remove whatever obstacles still exist, to really get that activity, that implementation going, that sometimes remains blocked. I think we must
blocked also because there are various structural issues and challenges that persist on the continent. Do you see governments adequately addressing those structural and core issues?
Well, I think governments are trying, and I think we need to recognize that. I think it is easier to get business licenses. For example, I was in a session this morning where somebody made the point that it is easier to get a license to do banking business in many countries now than it was 5 years ago, or to open up a business to get a telecoms license, for example. But I think we have a joint responsibility for working together and saying, when things remain difficult, to sitting down and having an open, frank discussion with governments and saying, this isn't working, how do we make it work? How do we get it done better and faster?
Well, when it comes to open, frank discussions, the banking system is certainly in the spotlight on a global scale. I mean, we've got G20 leading the drive in changing banking regulation around the globe specifically. What's your view on the changes being proposed on that front and the impact it's said to have on Africa's banking system?
Well, let me make the point that I think that it is important to have a sound, sustainable, well-regulated banking system. It's important for the global economy. It's important for each one of us in our respective countries and on the African continent. I do think, though, that we need to think seriously about whether or not the changes that are being contemplated now under Basel III are really, and the time frames within which we want to make these changes are really going to have, are really going to impact, and what way they're going to impact our economies. I think there is a real concern that we have that these changes are going to impact us negatively, because they may constrain the ability for our economies to grow. So I think we have to find the balance between a well-regulated banking system and growth on the other hand.
Well, certainly still a challenging road ahead despite the opportunity, Maria.